Welcome back to DC Wrap. I'm Pat Pobletti with WisPolitics.com, and joining me this week is Wisconsin DNC member and Eau Claire City Council member Andrew Werthmann. Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me on, Pat. Appreciate it.
So I want to start this week's discussion kind of with the political ramifications following the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think it's pretty clear at this point, both parties have kind of staked out their positions on the nomination of a successor and kind of how that will proceed. So I wanted to ask you about mounting calls from your own party to add members to the U.S. Supreme Court kind of in retaliation for Republicans filling a vacancy right before a presidential election. Now, Joe Biden was speaking with a Wisconsin TV station and said it was a legitimate question, but he didn't really expand on that. So I want to put it to you. Is that a good idea? Should we have a President Biden in office come next year?
Well, I don't necessarily think that those calls make sense right now, because I don't think, to me, it's clear looking at what folks in Wisconsin want is they don't want to see a rushed process with the Supreme Court. They don't want to see, and during a deadly pandemic and all the things that people are worrying about, for us to go through this incredibly stressful process. And so I think that's the first step. I think long term, one of the things that, if Republicans decide to rush the process, to not listen to the will of voters on this, I think one of the things that is in my mind is that, we could have a court that is essentially a 6-3 conservative liberal split, and start taking away some of the foundations of our country in terms of Roe v. Wade, getting rid of Roe v. Wade in terms of the Affordable Care Act and pre-existing conditions, which we're actually looking at right now, and some of the environmental protections that have been put in place. All these things could be eroded within a matter of months and years. And I think that what that tells me is that we live in a country where we had 3 million more people vote for the Democrat last time running for the president, and yet we could have an erosion of all of these things. How in anyone's mind does the court then reflect, I think, where our country is at this point and in terms of our values? I think that's really a really hard thing to look at. So I would say that it's not something that I think that should be looked at lightly, but I do think that we have to be thinking about, when we have a country where 2 senators from Wyoming equal 2 senators from California, and yet that state has 60 times the population of Wyoming. Think about what that does to our U.S. Senate and the balance of power and how it reflects our country, and think about what that does to our Supreme Court, because they're the ones who nominate it. I just have a hard time understanding how that's the kind of democracy that we want to be living in.
Now, I want to turn to the state of the presidential race, and we've seen a pretty clear and consistent lead built up by Joe Biden over President Trump. Now, we're less than 6 weeks out for the election. Do you have any concerns that anything you're seeing or hearing on the ground in Eau Claire could lead to Biden's lead slipping away?
I think the race is going to tighten. And I think that the polls that we're seeing right now are not likely going to be the same on an election day. I think Biden is in a strong position. I think I would much rather, I think that absolutely the polls are going to be tighter than that, than what we're showing. It's something like 6 to 8% in the recent polls. One of the things that I think sometimes happens is people take it for granted what the outcome is. And that's something that I'm concerned about. I think that people got to continue to push hard to volunteer, donate, get involved, make sure they're getting their friends out to the polls, all the things that, we saw in 2018 that created a successful election for Democrats. I think without the campaign that Biden and Democrats and folks across the state are running this year is much stronger than 2016. And I think by all accounts, people can see that.
So the inverse of that question then is, as you said, we're kind of expecting the polls to tighten. Is there anything you think Biden could do to kind of lock down Wisconsin for Democrats?
Well, I think there's a few things. One is in terms of, you know, continuing to make visits to the state. I know he's already visited a couple times in the last few weeks. Western Wisconsin is a key part of this. I hope to see the Biden campaign visit this area of the state. La Crosse, Eau Claire. We have many of the counties that flipped from being Obama supporting to Trump supporting. And I sense that, you look at Tricia Zunker's campaign in the 8th, in the 7th, and how close, not how close, but how many votes she was able to make up. I think that, we're seeing a trending in many of our rural areas to Democrats and to Biden and to like Tricia Zunker. And so if Biden continues to show that he's, going to provide leadership in the pandemic, that he's going to provide healthcare, that he's going to look out for small businesses, all the things that I think Wisconsin values, and we want to see more of, and he's here on the ground talking about that. That's something that I think will be really valuable. But without a doubt, I'm looking at things like the amount of people that are volunteering right now, the amount of staff that the Democratic Party has on the ground, the amount fundraised is surpassing all goals. It's pretty historic, actually. So I think the campaign's in a strong position. But without a doubt, I think Biden needs to continue to come and share the message of what it will look like under his leadership.
So to close out, I want to talk about your area of expertise, the DNC. Now,
Sure.
Obviously, it was pretty disappointing for the state as a whole to lose the Milwaukee convention. And I've seen some say that the DNC should bring its convention back to Milwaukee in 4 years' time. Now, I imagine that's something you probably support, but I'm curious, how widespread is that position among your colleagues?
I definitely support that. We work really, really hard as the elected members of the DNC from Wisconsin, our chair and our vice chair of our party. And we worked really hard to make sure that the DNC, the national DNC, knew that Milwaukee and Wisconsin was a good place to hold the convention. And I think it's a really unfortunate circumstance that we couldn't bring in, folks to the community. I saw this video about this business that had stocked up all their cheese in their store in Milwaukee, and now it was all going to waste. And it's just really unfortunate to see that we didn't have that kind of economic boost, and for people to really experience our state, not to mention the political piece of organizing and creating momentum. So my hope is that in 4 years' time, we can bring it back to Milwaukee. And I have heard other colleagues of mine also talk about wanting to see that. And I actually think there's DNC members that are interested in potentially seeing Milwaukee be that spot again. I think, to me, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to be pushing forward as a DNC member.
So the last thing I have for you, Andrew, I always like to close out these little sessions by opening up the floor to my guests. So what are you thinking about? What's on your mind that political insiders should be keeping tabs on?
And Pat, thanks again for doing this DC wrap and all that you're doing with West Politics. It's awesome. I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that I think people are, really in a sort of tired and frustrated and divisive space. I think we're seeing it online. We're seeing it in our communities. We want, I think we wanted to return to some sense of normal in this country. And, Western Wisconsin, I think, is a great example of a place where we generally look out for each other. We get along with our neighbors. We want to see our communities thrive. And this has been a really challenging and testing year, 2020 has. And so I think what we're going to see is people say, let's start a new chapter. Let's look at, how we can get back to sort of a more civil discourse, and how we can, really think about policies that positively impact folks' lives, because that's what this really all comes down to in politics is how are we making sure that the issues that our representatives, whether it's state or federal or local, are making are positively impacting people's lives day to day. And so I think those are the things that we need to be continuing to focus on.
Andrew, once again, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for all you do, and be in touch.
Till next week, I'm Pat Pobletti.